Aeven Mana Wars is a place filled with dangerous mobs, and a ton of different weapons for you to choose from. Combat is essential in Aven, and learning the skills needed to defeat all of the tough mobs of Aven is incredibly important. There are many different weapon types in Aven. We'll be going over each of them in today's video, in addition to going over all of the different spells that you can use in combat at this point in the beta. For now, let's go ahead and put on the light armor. As you can see, the light armor gives you plus a small percentage of defense, minus a bit of movement speed, and minus 35 mana pool. The mana pool can be found at the bottom of your screen, where your level would normally be. Right now, I have 1014 mana. With a full set of light armor, my mana pool is now at 779. Let's try out the heavier armor and see what it does to our mana pool. You can already tell from these statistics that the heavy armor will give you more percentage of defense, but less movement speed and a lot less mana pool. Our mana pool is now down to 544, and our movement speed is considerably less. While there are situations for using both types of armor, for now we're going to go with the light armor, full set, and let's start with the sword as our first weapon. This is a good average one-handed weapon, however it is not as strong as many of the other weapons, but it will allow you to parry moves, like so. Moving now from the sword to the axe, you can see that damage is increased. The minus attack speed and mana regen stays the same. However, the axe also has knockback, but it doesn't have the parry ability. The axe is another good one-handed weapon that allows you to use a shield as well. With its greater damage than a sword, it's a little bit easier to kill mobs, however, the parry won't be able to work. Now let's go from the axe to the mace. The damage is a little bit less, but the knockback is a little bit greater. With the additional knockback, it's much easier to be able to get hits on enemies. However, it will strike for less damage, so it will be a little bit harder to defeat enemies. It's also important to note that potions are a very important part of Aven combat. You might need multiples of them to defeat some enemies. Potions will give you a few seconds of regen, and restore your hearts fairly quickly. Food will also give you regeneration, but not at the same rate that potions do. The next weapon, the Great Sword, is most comparable to the normal sword. It does twice the amount of damage, however it doubles the attack speed minus. It can also parry, so it's very similar to the sword, however it is a two-handed weapon, so you won't be able to use your shield. Let's test out the Great Sword in combat. You can see that its additional damage makes it a lot easier to kill mobs, and its parry ability is also helpful, as with the regular sword. However, the negative attack speed is something that you need to keep in mind while facing mobs in Aven. Next up for the two-handed weapons is the battle axe. Again, comparable to the axe. As you can see, it does another 100 damage as compared to the axe, however, it does double the negative attack speed. It also has a little bit more knockback. However, remember that the shield will not be able to be used, and axes cannot parry. Make sure to use knockback when you're using a great axe, for that is your greatest asset. Next up is another two-handed weapon, the Warhammer. This replaces the mace, and is a two-hand instead of one hand. It does an additional 100 damage, again decreasing your attack speed by twice the amount that the normal mace would. However, the Warhammer is the master of knockback. It is very, very useful if you want to keep your opponents far, far away from you. However, again, you cannot use a shield or parry in any way. So this is a very dangerous weapon if an enemy doesn't take much knockback. Going to a very different style of weapon now, we have the staff. Staves are best used for the mages types. If you're using a lot of spells, make sure that you have the staff. This weapon has 5 mana regen. It does decrease your attack speed a little bit, but not as much as a two-hand weapon. It doesn't do much damage either, and that's because this weapon is meant for being able to regenerate your mana fast. When using it in combat without any spells, you'll find that it is not very efficient. Again, this is mostly used for the mages, and allows you to use spells faster because of the additional mana regen. This is not going to help you out very much in combat unless you're using spells. The final weapon type is the bow. Obviously, this is used for archers mainly, and it has many spells that go along with it. Without spells, it won't do a lot, but it will allow you to pick off enemies from a long distance, as in normal Minecraft. Remember that for each weapon, it can go from a variety of levels, or tiers. The tiers are basic, honed, pristine, exotic, and legendary. The better tier your item is, the more power it will have, and the less negative statuses. Next, we're going to be going over each and every spell, starting with counterattack. Counterattack can only be used with weapons that can parry, so make sure that you're using either a sword or a greatsword. Let's parry real quick, and then attack. That attack did 150% of the damage that it normally would, meaning we can kill enemies faster than we would normally. This does require a bit of timing and skill to be able to pull off successfully, but it will definitely help you be able to defeat enemies faster if you can get it down. The next spell, called Whirlwind, will work with any melee weapon, meaning you can't use the bow for this spell. To use it, do Sneak and F. Whirlwind is good for dealing damage to enemies in all directions. It doesn't do more damage than usual, but it will deal damage to more enemies than it would normally. Next on our list is Full Heal. This will heal the target or the user for 40% of their maximum health. Use the spell by pressing Sneak and F. You do have to be looking upwards for it to actually work, or if you're using it on someone else, look at their feet. Keep in mind that this will route you to the spot that you are currently at, or if you're using it on someone else, they'll be unable to move for the few seconds that this spell is active. Again, using a melee weapon, Burst of Power lets you sneak and then immediately go into a sprint to do increased damage. It's a little bit tricky to pull off, so make sure you practice a little bit before doing it on a mob. Next I'll be covering Triple Shot and Explosive Shot, both of which are used with the bow and have similar keybinds. Both of these spells are really easy to pull off. To do Triple Shot, start charging a bow and then press F. This will shoot 3 arrows rapid fire. It's really helpful for getting enemies pulled backwards and to defeat them quickly before they can get to you. Explosive Shot is much the same, however you have to press Shift before pressing F. Hold Shift, then press F. You will deal explosive damage, and you might be able to hit an enemy into the air or hit multiple enemies at once. Next up is the spell Disengage. If you're being chased by a bunch of enemies and need to get out of combat quickly, simply press Shift and then jump. You'll move backwards really fast and escape from enemies. Next is Flash Heal, which is very similar to Full Heal, however it will only do 20% of the target's health, and it won't freeze them in place as long. Again, you need to either be looking at an ally's feet or above your own head to be able to use this spell. Simply get out of combat, look up, and then press F. You can do this while moving, so it's much easier to use than Full Heal, however it won't heal you for as much damage. For Healing Hands, we're going to need another person to be able to use it. This spell is activated by shifting and then right-clicking. So let's get into combat real quick. He's using Healing Hands on me while these mobs are attacking. As you can see, I'm quickly regenerating my health. Healing Hands doesn't cost much mana, so it's a very mana-efficient way to heal people, although it doesn't heal you for very much. Our next spell is called Dodge, which can be done by moving one direction and pressing Shift. There we go. It's quite hard to pull off, especially when you're being mobbed by enemies like this, but it will help you avoid a little bit of damage. There we go. Dodge them again. Blink allows you to teleport. Let's try it out in creative mode. There we go. We made it away. Have you ever wanted to float your enemies in the air and blind them? Well, you can do so in Aven. Let's go into survival mode and try this out. This spell is done by pressing Sneak and F. Very, very, very helpful in PvP, as you can probably guess. The spell Double Jump can be done by jumping and then pressing Sneak in midair. A little easier to see in F5 mode. You can jump over 2 blocks pretty easily. Warrior's Leap will throw you right into the center of things by pressing Sneak and Jump. You will jump towards enemies very quickly, knock them backwards, and then gain a little bit of damage reduction. Sneak and Jump. We went right over them. It can be used to escape, but really it's meant to charge straight towards the mobs. Crippling Weakness causes damage over time, slowness, and weakness to your enemies, and it's very simple to pull off. All you have to do is sneak and hit. they will immediately get particles, move a lot slower, and start taking a little bit of damage over time. The next spell is called Levitate, and does what you might expect. It makes you levitate. It's mostly for mages so that they can stop for a second, get out of combat, and heal their allies. Mana Bolts is a pretty tricky spell to pull off, but it definitely pays off if you can get it down. Look at someone's feet, hold F, and you'll shoot homing mana bolts at them. These will go straight for your enemies and track them down as they move. Pretty cool spell, huh? For timed block, you'll want both a melee weapon and a shield. If you raise your shield really fast and then attack, your attack will stun the enemy. Let's try this out in survival mode. You can see that they were stunned for a second. They have little particles that appear over their heads. The final spell is called Rift Step and will allow you to teleport behind an enemy. Let's try it on this guy over here. Sneak and then jump. There we go. We teleported behind him. Definitely useful for PvP. Currently, that is all the spells and weapon types available in-game. It's up to you to find strategies of which spells and weapon types to use at once, and to find rare weapons that will help you in combat. Hopefully these combat strategies have helped you out in your adventure in Aeven Mana Wars.